the common people have noticed something, and that something is the fact that the mechanical rot logbook is missing. So if you were to go into the M section, well, if the bloody thing loads, the logbook loads because like it's broken, you'll notice that yes, there are all these cat images, which, you know, fair enough, these are from the recent event, the Null Warden, for example, yes. And then in the M section, where the mechanical rot should be, it's not there. So if you go to Molten, not there. But then if you go to Megaduck, not there. It should be mechanical, so it's C, so it should be about here-ish. But quite evidently, it's not here. Not here at all. Go back to the Fs, it's not between the Fs and the Ms. So, very clearly, it's been removed. And many people have asked, why is this the case? And there have been a lot of speculation, including the fact that the developers may have accidentally removed it. But I think there's a very good chance that it may have been on purpose why the developers have removed it. Now, it's not the case where you are missing the mechanical rot logbook. Do you know how I know it's the case? Because if you were to go into sandbox mode, if you have admin mode as well, because you can't spawn in legacy enemies without admin mode, but if you were to do this, you would find that the mechanical rot legacy enemy is still here. So search up mechanical rot. Here we go, mechanical rot logbook. And the only way to spawn it in is to have the mechanical rot logbook. Now, you'll notice that you could also spawn it in from previously with the legacy hidden wave, but the legacy hidden wave has been removed because, well, I can't spawn in the creator, for example. So the only legitimate way of spawning this one in is to have the mechanical rot logbook. Quite evidently, it's not been removed. So, you know, calm down. If you have, or you had, the mechanical rot logbook, you can still get some benefit out of it in admin mode. However, yes, the modern version of the mechanical rot has been removed, seemingly, but I think there's a very good reason why, and it relates to Night 2 of the Halloween event, which may have not been released at this point. Well, it's not released by when this video is going to be released, but by the time that you watch this video, there is a good chance that it would have been released. Now, this all relates to enemy renames and enemy spawn rings. So, for example, right, if you were to find the Corsair Necromancer, you can't find it. That's listed under the Frost Necromancer. But if you were to spawn it in, it would actually have the name of Corsair Necromancer. This is because the enemy would be reused for the Corsair Mega Edition, and basically what happened was the enemy was renamed from Frost Necromancer into Corsair Necromancer and was used for the Corsair Hunt Mega Edition. However, the developers actually got into some trouble. I don't think this was the main issues. Actually, I do know what the main issue was, but we won't talk about it here. The developers accidentally secretly leaked the Frost Necromancer returning as part of the Corsair Hunt Mega Edition, which, I mean, technically leaked a little bit about the Corsair Mega Edition. It's not that much of a big deal, but it is enough of a big deal that the developers actually disabled, I think, some legacy enemy spawning ins into sandbox mode. Now, I'm not sure that the Corsair Necromancer or the Frost Necromancer actually spawned in anything that was leaking from like the Corsair Hunt Mega Edition. It just spawned in like the Corsair Seekers and stuff like that, which were from the previous Corsair event, well, the Hunt First Edition event. But imagine, right, the developers had re-added the Frost Necromancer, or they'd coded the Frost Necromancer for the Hunt Mega Edition. They've accidentally changed like the Corsair Necromancer spawning in stuff, so that it spawned in some exclusive enemies that we've never seen before, not the Corsair Warrior or the Corsair Undead that's seen up here. The community would actually get a first taste and a leak, not really an illegal leak, but an unintended leak of an upcoming event. And I think that it's likely the case where the developers may have modified the mechanical rot enemy so that it's used in either Night 2 or Night 3 of the Halloween event, and the developers, instead of like removing the enemy entirely or keeping the enemy in the game, which could accidentally leak stuff about the Night 2 or Night 3, they've decided to remove it from the sandbox and logbooks temporarily. Again, it's not the complete removal of the logbook, because again, you can spawn in the mechanical rot legacy enemy. You can't spawn in the mechanical rot modern enemy. Now, why would they do this? I mean, obviously I've mentioned that it could be spawning in enemies that are exclusive to the event and could accidentally leak an unintended leak of enemies in the new event, which we've never seen before. It also could give some clues on how much health that the mechanical rot enemy would have. I don't know how much it had in the null zone. It had like 600,000 health, I think, but it may have been buffed. It may have been changed in the new Night 2 or Night 3, wherever the mechanical rots could be used. And so to keep it safe, it looks like they've disabled it from modern logbooks, and I think by disabling it in the modern enemies and then removing it from the logbooks, it looks like they've kept any changes that they've made to the mechanical rot a secret, at least on paper. So once the mechanical rot enemy actually is added to Night 2 or Night 3, if that's the case, I think it would be re-enabled again, and I don't think it's been completely removed. So I think there's a very good chance that the mechanical rot appears in Night 2 or Night 3, although it's not 100% confirmed. The mechanical rots may also receive some other changes that we didn't see during the live event, where many people got the logbook for mechanical rot. It's the only place where you could get it. And the fact that the Corrupticon server hasn't gone offline suggests to me that the Corrupticon server isn't going to be used for the upcoming Halloween events. And also it does mean that the Corrupticon server is probably going to remain one of the rarest logbooks in Tower Defense Simulator, whereas for the mechanical rot, I bet that it's going to become more common once people start grinding out for it. Now, given that the mechanical rot was a completely new enemy design, not really completely new, it just borrowed off the Jacobot design from the, the Lunar Overture event in 2023, but it was like a new design based on that. I think it's likely that the developers actually had a use of this enemy in mind, because other enemies that were used in the nil zone have actually returned to Night 1 of the Halloween event. So, just to name a few, so I believe the Corrupted Blightwalker that returned, the Corrupted Horror returned, the Corrupted Beast also returned. So all of these enemies that were, first appeared during the Halloween live events, which didn't appear previously, have now returned as part of the events that Tower Defense Simulator is doing for the Null and Void event. The only enemies not to return are enemies that have appeared previously in Tower Defense Simulator. So, for example, the Unknown Boss, which was an enemy which appeared during the Hexscape event, didn't return to a live event. The Actor 3, Actor 2, and Actor 1, they have not also returned. The Enigma also didn't return, but that's because they're all from the Hexscape event. If you are originally from a previous event, it looks like you don't return. That's also the case for the Corrupticon server. That doesn't look like it's returned to Tower Defense Simulator's Null and Void event. But the mechanical rot isn't a returning enemy. Yes, it's a returning enemy in the sense that it shares a name with a legacy enemy, the mechanical rot enemy from the Hidden Wave, but this enemy in of itself is a new and unique enemy, which I think is likely to be the case, that they're going to reuse this enemy for one of the bosses or mini bosses in Tower Defense Simulator's Null and Void event. I'm not saying it's going to be the final boss, given that from the leaks that I'm going to show you in a minute, it looks like there's going to be another boss, but definitely I think the mechanical rot is very likely to return. It may also be the case that the mechanical rot has a different name that the developers changed it to, given that the Core Blocks Necromancer was a rename from the Frost Necromancer, even though it's still listed internally under the Frost Necromancer. So it could be renamed, but we don't know for now. Now, this leads me on to Night 2 leaks. With this, we know that it's coming out on the 25th of October, 10 PM my time, so that's about 5 PM EST, the developer's time zone. And from the thumbnail, we can see, well, I initially speculated that this is the Swarmer. Actually, I think more likely now that this is a null version or an evil version of the Electroshocker. The Electroshocker uses something very similar to this, and it looks like there's a Tesla coil on its back, which could mean like an indication for speedy. So, for example, once this enemy dies, it could act very similar to the circuit. And the circuit has an ability where if it dies, we're talking about the Polluted Wastelands 2 circuit, by the way, once it dies, it gives a speed boost of nearby enemies by 25% for a limited period of time. It could also be like just a feature of this enemy, so it's not necessarily some feature that's going to be used for an ability, but I think that's likely going to be the case given the way that the coil is positioned on the back of this Electroshocker corrupted version. This also does befit the theme of all of the enemies that we've seen so far, since they have been corrupted or null versions of towers that we've seen, such as the Null Freezer, the Null Warden, and the Null Pyromancer. And like I said previously, the helmet for the Electroshocker does look quite similar to the version that we've seen in the game, this version of the Electroshocker. Now, the vest itself isn't there. It does look like it has some sort of clothing, but it's not like this version, I don't think, at the very least. Furthermore, I'm not entirely sure that this map here is indicative of anything. We know, I think it shows in the last cutscene towards the end, that the Dispatcher and like the other people there, I think that included the minigunner, the scout, and the commander, they were swallowed up into this void realm or something and consumed by whatever this was and are in like the null zone or whatever it is. Now, this isn't actually the first thumbnail to be used for the Night 2 leak. This thumbnail actually is, and from this, there's actually substantially more. So we see the scout, the minigun, and the commander here, so it looks like they were sucked into whatever this null zone is. But in the background, we can see some sort of enemy, and many people have speculated that this is going to be some sort of Marcellus Night 2 boss. Now, I think that this could have been an error, and this could be, let's say, a Night 3 boss, because if it was to be a child of Exo to be the boss, that would seem to be a Night 3 thing, not a Night 2 thing. Oh yeah, I need to explain that the Children of Exo's names haven't actually now been formally leaked, but more on that later. There also appears to be bats in the background, which is very interesting, but we also see the electroshocker-ish thing that we saw on the current thumbnail in this background here. So it looks like this is going to be the thumbnail, the main game thumbnail that's going to be used for the event. I guess it was changed over to this because this version of the thumbnail leaks a little bit too much, especially with the boss that's going to be used for Night 2, or is speculated to be used with Night 2. Not confirmed there. And also, this thumbnail was public, so developers, I can talk about it and I can speculate on it. Please don't come after me. But yes, the Child of Exo, or the Children of Exo, all of their names have been leaked. So we've seen Titus, we've seen Sentinel Raminal, he escaped. Next is Marcellos, and Marcellos is apparently this character here. And it looks very similar to this, especially with like the helmet cutting off like the bottom part of its lip. Not entirely confirmed to be Marcellos, but you know, something very similar at the very least. And finally, the last name for the Children of Exo is Kronos, and Kronos is speculated to be the last person shown off in the thumbnail, which was seen in the previous Hexscape event. Titus, Sentinel Raminal, Marcellos, or Marcellus, and Kronos. Kronos being the name of time, I think. Not sure if this event literally relates to time. It is null and void, so it's more about destruction and creating the God Cube, or rearranging the God Cube into an actual cube again. So looks like Kronos may not get involved in this, but it looks like we're slowly, one by one, each event, introducing ourselves with each Children of Exo. Titus has died, for the most part, I think. I'm not sure. It doesn't say he's deceased. I mean, it looks like he was corrupted, so like maybe he was deceased, but I don't know. Sentinel Raminal, fair enough. We've seen this. He escaped during the Operation Ice event after giving us a keycard, which allowed us to reassemble the God Cube and create a hole or whatever. And then we have Marcellius and Kronos. Actually, in this thumbnail or this image, it looks like this is Marcellus and this is Kronos. So actually, whichever way round that it works, we are not entirely sure. But it does look like the case where one of the Children of Exo, speculated to be Marcellius, is one of the bosses for this event. Although I wouldn't be surprised if it's not the case, given that Sentinel Raminal wasn't one of the bosses during the Operation Ice event. He was just the main protagonist of that event, if you know what I mean. Now, in terms of the Night 2 description, a dreadful night, isn't it? Welcome to the outer nil zone, where all the forgotten and discarded end up, including you. It looks like we have definitely been transported into the nil zone, sorry. And in terms of the nil zone, we've seen this in the live events. It looks like we've gotten a little bit of an introduction, the pre-event, shall we say, night 0 of the nil zone. This is probably going to be a different nil zone, although I wouldn't be surprised if the developers were to reuse bits of the nil zone that we've seen previously. There's also been some speculation that narrator is returning, given his laugh, or well, enthrallist laugh, which is used for the narrator at the end of the previous cutscene. But also, Lord Exo could potentially return, but also something to do with like the Guardians or whatever they were that came in through the portal and was like, yo, it's a bad idea to recreate the God Cube. Please don't do that. We fragmented it for a reason. And that's why I'm saying Professor V, right? I think she got her degree from like the Open University. She doesn't have a legitimate degree. If she thinks that creating a God Cube, again, is a good idea after it was fractured, for whatever reason, she must have needed to investigate why the God Cube itself was fragmented in the first place. I think she's a very secret child of Exo. Just saying. Professor V, meaning Professor Vive, given the fact that there are 4 other Children of Exo, the 5 here could represent the 5th child of Exo. I'm just saying, right? She's very suspicious. Vote her out. I also don't think that the Riftwalkers are actually proper enemies. I think what they are is like they were the original like Tower Defense Simulator organization, and they were the people who actually shattered the God Cube into fragments, and that's why there are like a load of fragments that are scattered for some reason around Tower Defense Simulator land, and which is why, I guess because of the power that the God Cube has, and we are going to lore here, the Rift Walkers, they decided to smash it up. They literally say the cube must have remained shattered, or they should have remained shattered. The existence is a threat to us all. So I guess they banished the people who brought it together into the nil zone for whatever reason, because they didn't trust us or anything like that. I guess an implication is that if you're in the nil zone, you are forgotten about, which is why there are a lot of returning enemies that we saw in the nil zone, such as the Corrupted Conserver, the Unknown, and the Unknown Small, and stuff like that, the Enigma, for example, as well. I mean, also, there were some Breakers, which aren't dead enemies, and yes, very evidently here, you can see the Commander, the Scout, the Minigunner, and the Dispatcher being sent through the portal, which is the first time that a Dispatcher has actually been sent down there after, I think, during Night 2 for the Hexscape events. The Commander, Minigunner, and Scout were the people who were sent into, the Corrupted Conservers... No, sorry, not the Corrupted Conservers, the Conservers realm. So it looks like the case where the Dispatcher actually is getting a taste of a medicine for once, after, sending field agents into death. She might actually have accidentally sent herself to death. Obviously, they're probably going to get out of it because we know how Tower Defense Simulator works. But also, I have an interesting theory that the narrator is in the nil zone. Remember how, there's this whole lore about how Night 3 of the the Lunar Overture event just doesn't exist. The developers say it's not canon whatsoever. I think it's the case where the narrator may have been banished into the nil zone as part of this whole, null and void thing, where the Riftwalkers, they were like, Naji, you don't exist. We're going to send you to a zone where you don't exist at all, the nil zone, and they're going to somehow retcon the narrator to be part of Tower Defense Simulator again, but as in the case where, it did exist, but then we just sent it downstairs because it was broken, and it's part of this zone where it just exists but doesn't exist at the same time. Think of the nil zone as the trash can of Tower Defense Simulator. Anything rejected should be down there. So I expect there to be a lot of things returning, and it actually may explain something in the lobby. So if you were to go over into the event area, many people would point out that there are many things from returning stuff. So Krampus, for example, there's the Krampus helmet and then the Krampus chair. But then also over here, you have what appears to be the Abyss, and then you also have the Umbria's Star Cannon. Now, I think the Krampus stuff has actually maybe been retconned, I'm not sure. But certainly the Abyss, it was never added to Tower Defense Simulator, at least in the version that we see currently here. It was meant to be a PvP boss, but was not added. However, I think it could be the case where in the nil zone, the zone where removed stuff go, I think it's very much the case where the developers may add some stuff that were cancelled from previous projects, such as the Abyss, as part of this nil zone. After all, this is a zone where things are forgotten about, so the Abyss being a forgotten enemy being down there, I think is very likely to be a candidate as one of the enemies that appears down here. Not going to say that it's going to be the final boss. After all, we've seen some thumbnails which suggest that Marcellus could be the final boss, but that could have been the final boss for Night 3, and they may have accidentally uploaded that. So, Night 2 is looking to be very, very suspicious, but also looking to be very, very interesting in terms of lore. But certainly, if the Abyss returns, then I think it's the case where the Mechanical Rot could also return, because technically there is a removed enemy from the Hidden Wave, but obviously that's not confirmed. Also, again, I think it's likely to be the case where the developers add a new area of the lobby here for Night 2. They didn't add this part because it may have led to some speculation of leaks in Tower Defense Simulator that the developers didn't want to be leaked. But also, I think it's very likely that elevators are going to be used again rather than matchmaking, because it seems like the developers are moving over to matchmaking in elevators rather than matchmaking through UI again. Not sure why that's the case, but fair enough. And also, it's not matchmaking actually as well, because when you go into the elevator, you then choose the amount of players, so you're not actually fully matchmaking. So, not sure why the developers have removed matchmaking from elevators, but I could speculate it in a different video. Now, a final word on Night 3. I think that this is going to be released a week after Night 2, although that being said, Halloween, the 31st of October, is on a Friday, and I think there is a chance that the developers may have released, or will release, Night 3 on a Friday and give us 6 days to do Night 2 and beat it. I have no confirmation on that. I just speculate that it's probably going to be a week after, given that Night 2 was a week after Night 1. Interestingly enough, I don't know which door Night 2 is going to be. Here, play Night 2 to unlock, so it looks like it's actually going to be this door for Night 3 and then this door for Night 2. I also do not think that there's going to be a live event for Night 2. I know previously I speculated and the developers told us that there would be live events for each release of the nights in Tower Defense Simulator. However, due to the fact that the game was, I guess, heavily unoptimized, not for me. I mean, to be fair, I was getting like single frame graphics during the live event in the original live event, the October 4th live event, I think. But because of that, the developers didn't want to introduce live events, and also live events while there is an event going on is probably not a good idea. To admin abuse when there is an event and people trying to beat it for the first time, I don't think it gives a good look, and that's one of the criticisms that the community had towards the developers, that they couldn't beat the first live event, the 1 hour 30-minute live event, in time. But the developers did say that after the first optimization update in Tower Defense Simulator, they would make some live events for people to play. And given that the optimization update for Tower Defense Simulator seemingly has been added, at least from what the developers have said in the progress feed, at 7 o'clock in the, well, 7 minutes past midnight actually, in the morning, while I report on this video, it looks like that there could be live events in the future, and given that I'm missing 2 band crates, I think that the developers may do the live events over the weekends, maybe Sunday even, compared to the Saturday when it should be releasing. However, again, that's not confirmed that there's going to be a live event for Night 2. I'm just merely speculating that there could be because of the optimization update. Although, I don't know how much optimization the game has after the complaints that people have had previously. And I guess shout out to Out of Bears for making the optimization to Tower Defense Simulator. Again, I'm not sure how optimized the game is, but we'll see for Nights 2. If there are a load of complaints about the game being laggy, then I think more work needs to be done.